We're speaking to Dr. Indigo. She is a success and mind wellness practitioner here in Malaysia. Welcome, Dr. Indigo, on the Light Breakfast.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Now, tell us about your. You were the CEO of Careers in Transition back in America, which is a human resources consulting firm. Tell us about how you first started the company and what inspired you to go into coaching.
What was interesting is back in 1994 or so, I encountered huge racism. And I know we're talking about this stuff today, but back in the 90s, with my background, I was in an organization that was very, very racist. And I said, I will never be in a position where someone can control my destiny. So I started my own company, and that was in 1995, Careers in Transition. And at that time, companies were paying a lot of money to help transition people out of the organization, whereas now they just fire you. But back in the day, they were more compassionate, and I would help people transition, help them find another job, and so forth. So I became a career expert.
Now, the firm began actually as a home-based training practice, right? But you grew it into a multi-million-dollar management consulting firm, and it was recognized as one of the top 500 fastest-growing companies in America. I mean, how did you work towards growing a home-based company into a multi-million-dollar company?
Now, what's funny is that, yes, it started in my basement. The basement wasn't even finished. You could see the stuffing and everything in the walls because we had no siding up or anything. But I had a Rolodex, and most of your listeners probably won't remember. Oh, yeah, they will.
Rolodex. I remember Rolodex, yeah.
So I had a Rolodex, and that's all I needed was a Rolodex and a phone. And I started, networking and started working with people. And yes, it started growing. So after it subsided in terms of company doing right sizes and downsizing, they started asking me, well, what else do you have? And that's when I started doing large projects. And let's say 15 years later, it did take time to get there. And maybe we'll talk about that a lot of people want instant success because they don't see what you've gone through to get where you are. If people saw me and they would see me walking across the stage, either getting money or giving money or whatever, they thought that happened overnight. But over the 15-year term or time, then I started developing an expertise. So I started working with organizations like the Pentagon. I did a huge mentoring program for the CIA. This little organization. I don't know if you heard of it or not.
The CIA is, I don't know much about it. Jason Bourne and all that. Okay, sure.
NASA was one of my big clients, did a lot of stuff for NASA. So, I work with some of the top American government agencies, as well as places like Halliburton. And so I became that go-to person when you needed to launch a project or to create change in your organization. So yeah, it was a long process, but it was about really becoming an expert in something.
Now, what's interesting is that you were growing your company while being diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yes.
Was it not? Like, when were you diagnosed with this bipolar disorder? And did it affect how you ran your business?
Girl, yes. So let me just say this. It was my bipolar disorder that made me the huge success. You mentioned I made the Inc. 500 list once. I actually made it twice. One year, I was 239 out of 500 of the fastest growing companies in America. And Forbes reported that year, there was 28 million small businesses. So out of 28 million, I was 239
Wow.
largest, fastest growing companies. And I made it twice, as well as I made the 1,000 list like in 2014 or so. So I say that to say this. It was my diagnosis, the something about people who have bipolar disorder, there's different types of bipolar. I was blessed to have what's called bipolar 2. Those are the people who are using musicians, authors, people who are in politicians, because we can think so radically different than the norm that we can make things happen. Like you mentioned, I have a book. I believe I have 5 books. In one book I wrote in like 2 weeks because
What?
I was having what they call an episode. So I was able to knock that book out in no time. And those are the beauty and the traits of that disorder. We may get into the downside as well, because also having it, I was really hard on my staff. I expected them to be like me. I was a taskmaster. I was working on my PhD in leadership. So I had a lot of pressure on me, working on these big clients, having the family, traveling around the world. It was really tough, and it took its toll on me. So I started, after I became public about my disorder, I had a speech that was called Living a Public Success While Living a Private Mess.
Wow. Wow.
But you were getting treatment all throughout your diagnosis and all throughout your career.
No,
No?
I was not. I'm like many people who are probably listening that know something is wrong, but refuse to go and check it out. You know, we go to the dentist to get our teeth cleaned and checked. We take our cars to get mechanics to check it out yearly and all that stuff, right? But we don't get our minds checked. We don't want to know. We just don't want to deal with that. We let other people deal with our madness, right? So when I started having a true breakdown, I mean, girl, I had it. It was a true breakdown. I literally checked myself in, and that's when I got the help that I needed, and it saved my life. Now I teach people how to manage their either their diagnosis or their belief that they think something may be happening. So I bridge people to professional help. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a counselor. I have a background. I used to teach psychology. I'm steeped in psychology. My doctorate my dissertation was around psychology in the mind, but I am not licensed to diagnose and so forth. But my experience allows me to bridge people to those types of services.
You spoke about your breakdown, right? Your major breakdown that led you to check yourself in, to get yourself some help. What led to that breakdown? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I believe a huge part of it is having a multi-million-dollar business. And your listeners can look it up. If they put in the $ $18 million woman, they'll pull up an article that was written about me, about one single contract that I had, which was $18 million. Then I had all these other multi-million-dollar contracts. I had 50 employees down in Atlanta. I had 50 employees in Washington, D.C., working on my PhD, having male, boys who were now teens or young men. So you can only imagine what that's like. A marriage that was rocky. So I had all these layers that many of us in life have. We all have these layers, and I could see something was wrong, but I also knew that I didn't want to have anything wrong. That was most important. So when I checked in, what's funny is they do all these batteries of tests, brain scans and everything. And I literally prayed. Please God, let this be a tumor. Let me have a tumor or cancer, because then they can operate. They can take whatever's wrong out. And when I found out that it was bipolar disorder, I cried. I knew I had a life sentence of being crazy, is how I felt. Now I realize it wasn't that at all. It was actually something that's treatable, is something that can be cared for, and it wasn't a life sentence like I thought it was.
And it was part of your success as well.
Oh, it's a huge part of my success. It's a part of my success right now. I'm serving on a committee that's coming out of Rotary 3300, where we're launching a commission that will take a look at mental health in Malaysia. So it's those types of things that I can attribute. You know, it's one thing to have the book learning, the degrees, and all that, but it's another thing to have the lived experience to be able to help people understand what people like me are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be really candid, 1 out of 4 of us have a mental health diagnosis. That does not include people who do not get help. So if we add 1 more person, I got us covered. So you all are good. But if we add a couple of more people, that's going to be 2. So when we look at the impact that people are walking around with mental health challenges and refuse to get help, it's because of the stigma, the same stigma I was faced with.
Yep. But with your diagnosis, did it make you work better after that? Like, no, I know what my problem is right now. I know how to handle it. I'm getting it treated. I will concentrate on my work.
Initially, no. I'm going to be very honest with you. Initially, no. And the reason why is because of the meds, the medications that I was taking. Think about it like a circuit breaker, right? You have a circuit breaker and all the lights, all the switches are up, right? So with all the switches up, that's causing me to be anxious. It's causing me to be a lot of things that go with that disorder, but it's also allowing me to be creative. It's allowing me to work through the night. It's allowing me not to even have to eat. I can talk for hours and not have to stop, right? So that is the upside. Now, when you take the medication, it doesn't distinguish between what's good, what's not. It just shuts everything off. So there were times people would come by my desk. I remember one of my employees said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why? What's going on?" She said, "You've been looking at your computer for over an hour now and it's not even on." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, okay."
Wow.
So I had to learn, in order for me to do what I do. I'm a writer. I had a mental health column, so I need to be able to write weekly. I'm a speaker, so I had to get up on stage. I needed back that touch of genius. I needed that touch to be able to touch the masses, right? So I couldn't be on the meds. So I had to find other ways to deal with my disorder. And that's where I learned Eastern philosophies. I tell people here that I talk about success from a Western perspective and wellness from an Eastern perspective, and I blend the 2. So yeah, initially it was very difficult for me until I learned how to manage it, along with people in my life who were able to help me.
Now, what first brought you here to Malaysia? You're based in Johor right now, are you not?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I say that a perfect storm blew me out of America and pulled me into Asia. What's interesting is that, you know, the word perfect storm is a true meteorological phenomenon. It means several storms to come together.
Yeah.
So my first storm was that I got a divorce after 20-something years with the man who I fathered birthed my children. The man that I grew up with, basically, we got a divorce. And in the divorce, because I was wealthy at the time, he got $500,000 in the settlement. Not $500,000 ringgits, $500,000 US. He got the house, he got everything. I mean, literally everything. And people will say, why was that? Well, in America, we have a thing called communal property. Because we had been together for so long, and I started my business while we were married, it looks as if he has 50% rights to my company. So my company was worth millions and millions, right? So instead of trying to split a company, which is virtually impossible, he gave me his terms and conditions. So that was the first storm. The next storm was, the mental health and all that type of stuff being layered. The actual storm that really just knocked me off my feet, to be honest with you, is that my right-hand person who managed all my finances, both personally and professionally, teamed up with one of my top leaders in my company, and they cleaned me out.
Oh.
They embezzled contracts, they embezzled my money, and the way we found out was they created dummy accounts. You know, when you're working on multi-million-dollar contracts, it's nothing to send someone $70,000 in a week because of the work that their company was doing under my company, right? So she created all these dummy companies and was siphoning all the money. And by the time I realized it, she was gone. It was too late. What's interesting, that happened in 2016, right? April of this year, I was scheduled to be in court because they indicted her, finally. It took over 3 years to get her arrested, indicted, and now we're going to court. Well, now that's been put on hold. But that was a significant storm. I came here with just boxes, and because we don't have Rolodexes anymore, I had boxes in my mind, and that's how I started here and had to rebuild my life.
Well, why Malaysia though?
Okay, I don't know if you know this, but you know Americans don't know geography.
No. I know that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's true, and I'm ashamed for saying it, but it's true. We don't know geography. So I did my internship for my PhD in China, in Beijing, and I did so well up there with my books and speaking that I said, I'd like to go back to China. Well, you just can't waltz into China without sponsorship and everything. So I tried to get as close as I could to try to get back to China. So I looked at Hong Kong and made trips to Hong Kong. Then I made trips to Singapore, and I didn't know about Malaysia. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. But now I consider it home. But I would do layovers in Malaysia. And I said, hey, let's go check out, what is Malaysia like? And I would go out in town and do all the, the stuff that there is to do, and fell in love with the place. So then I made a special trip just to come back and see if Malaysia is a viable place. I was taking trips to Panama. I mean, I was looking everywhere, and people would say, well, why? Because in America, you need money to survive. She took my money. Yeah. All I had was my knowledge, skills, and abilities. She couldn't take that. So I could take that anywhere and rebuild. So when I came here, I knew I could, start over. And I loved Malaysia. And I loved the heart and soul of what it represents. And I quickly assimilated. It became what I considered home very fast.
And it's easier to get to Singapore from Johor as well, I suppose.
And that's why I moved to Johor. I used to live in Kuala Lumpur for 2 years.
Right, okay.
And then I moved here, and then the MCO came, so work dried up. I couldn't go back over to do work or anything. I was doing work over at Singapore Management University.
Right.
Doing wellness conferences. I was doing all kinds of stuff there.
Malaysia, though. Yeah. Welcome.
But you also set up a company here in Malaysia.
I set up 2 here. I had one in Labuan with a work visa that did not allow me to work in Malaysia, which is why I was doing all my work everywhere else, but paying taxes here, which is interesting. So then I said, okay, I want to work in Malaysia as well. So I started another company named 4D Performance. So I had 2 companies, 4D Performance, and I opened it in Kuala Lumpur. And then I got HRDF certified, and that's another story too, but another day. But yeah, I did all the right things to be here.
What do you notice any difference between, being a speaker and a practitioner here in Malaysia as compared to back in America?
Yeah, there is. One, the culture is different. So I have to be mindful of what stories I tell. I have to be mindful of even what I wear. I respect the culture here. So I have to make sure that I have sleeves, my legs are covered. And I know that sounds very minuscule, but when you bring a wardrobe over that has the cuts and the different look, I have to really be mindful of even my messaging, how I say things, because I was in the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, being predominantly men and really rough and tough men, they speak a totally different language. So I say that I'm bilingual. I speak English and I speak profanity. And so when I'm on the stage in Malaysia, I have to always think about what I'm going to say, and then I have to translate it into regular English, and then I can say it. Otherwise, I would say all kinds of stuff that would probably have me yanked off the stage.
Like a sailor. Swearing like a sailor. I like that. Okay.
So what are some of the workshops or coaching that you've done here in Malaysia?
So right now I'm coaching. These two are very significant to me because one is in the UK, and I'm coaching them because they used to work here in Malaysia, and now they're back in the UK, and I can talk to them about their experiences and wrap up how it impacted them and how to move forward. So that they probably couldn't find with a coach in the UK if they've never lived in Malaysia. Then I have someone that I'm coaching from Singapore that's trying to write a book. And we started off really focusing on how to get this book written, but now we're dealing with him in a whole mind, body, spirit perspective. So it's not just about the book, it's about his well-being, it's about his family, it's about his career. And I love that type of work. In terms of doing things actually here in Malaysia, I'm not working in Malaysia because I don't have a work visa. So in the MCO, my, what do you call it? My passport stamp has expired. So now I have to wait for things to come into play so I can move forward.
What do you love about what you do? What's the best thing about what you do?
Everything. As I say that I don't live in a space of or, I live in a space of and, A-N-D. I love touching people, and I love putting together projects, and I love speaking. So I love all that I do. I've been very blessed because for me, for what I do, I'm able to be a whole person. I'm able to be authentically myself. And with that, I can make a difference in people's lives, especially when it comes to mental health. Almost everything I do, there's a thread of well-being and a thread of spirituality. And that makes all the difference in the world because many people don't speak from that standpoint.
Now, what's your advice, Dr. Indigo, for people who might be struggling with mental health themselves, but they still want to embark on a business or a project and be successful?
One or two things. One is come to terms that you need assistance. I'm not going to say help because help sounds like you're distressed. People need to understand that everyone has mental health. There is no one without mental health. It's a spectrum between illness and wellness. Most people who are ill, we don't even see them. Those are people who are usually medicated and they're not functioning in society. That's illness. Then you have neutral. Neutral is where they don't have any real emotions one way or the other. Many of us are working from neutral to well. And if someone is thinking about having a business or moving their career to a different level, they are usually in the well status. Now, will they ever have or slide down to neutral or into the illness arena? Yes, I do sometimes. Not often, but I do, because that is natural. If you become angry, if you become sad, fearful, all that will move you from the wellness spectrum down that slide. So we need to understand that all of our emotions, our thoughts are natural. It's what we do with them and how long they reside with us that will determine where you are on that spectrum. So if someone is thinking about getting into their own business or having a career move or jump, they need to stop and really assess their own mental well-being and decide, is what they're trying to do going to facilitate or hinder their mental well-being? Not everyone should have a business. It is very stressful, very, very stressful. Even being independent is stressful because you don't know where your next check is coming or your next gig. So if you're already someone who become anxious when things don't fall into place, I would really caution you trying to get out there on your own. So find a career or a gig that will support you as a whole person. And I think that's important, you know, and there are companies that will support you. There are careers that will support you. For instance, if you have OCD, being an accountant, being an attorney, being anything that requires you to be analytical and detailed and, you know, just really focused, that's for you. So almost every mental health diagnosis carries something that is actually beneficial.